Welcome everyone to the Learn, Earn and Thrive series. This series is designed to explore how job seekers can develop the skills that employers value, translating them into real income opportunities. Today's episode is skills over degrees, what employers really value in today's job market. There's been a lot of hiring practices and it's not really reflective of some of the advice that a lot of students in the schools are being told to focus on. So there's the traditional pathways, people moving from GCSEs, college, A-levels, all the way through to degrees. And sometimes these career opportunities that people pursue effectively, yields to a lot of debt. But does it really kind of be the right decision for those students? At the end of the day, the purpose of going through all that is to get a secure job, earn some money. So today we're going to focus on alternative options. Are they more viable? Because there's a growing trend that suggests that. So a lot of the data is showing that 73% of companies adopted skills-based hiring in 2023, and more than 45% of companies are expected to eliminate degree requirements from some of the roles altogether, so in 2024. So this is quite telling. So today we're introducing three guest speakers. So we've got Pritha Paul, and her background is in functional skills and digital skills development, and has worked closely with us for many years. We also got Ori Lamm, a business leader with experience across multiple industries, including technology and business support services, who will hopefully provide a lot of insight into how companies are adjusting their recruitment strategies to focus more on skills and competencies. And also we've got Gurnam Selvarajah, who's a strategic project leader with vast experience in business development and operational delivery. My name is Mohammed Rafis. I'm the head of partnerships at Provista. So welcome to everybody. And feel free to comment. And if you want to, contribute, please do participate through this whole process. So Pritha, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you think?
Yeah, hello, hi. I'm really happy to be here today and be a part of this webinar. If you would ask me this question maybe a year ago, I would have said education, degree,
Yeah.
because I come from a very degree-heavy background. My background is mathematics and statistics. I did my undergraduate. Then I moved on to doing a master's degree in astrophysics, and then currently I'm also pursuing a PhD. So if you'd ask me whether you should go to uni, I would definitely say yes, you should. But a year and a half ago, I joined the whole further education industry, in specific the functional skills industry. I started my journey as a tutor in English and mathematics, and then slowly moved on to also developing portfolios for digital skills, not just digital skills. I also did cybersecurity, and the list can go on and on. And I think my experience in this industry when I first started off, when I met with these learners who came in from several backgrounds, wasn't just coming from background which was very educational. I realized that it's not just education that's important. Yes, you learn a lot of skills when you're in a classroom. You learn how to do teamwork. You learn how to communicate with different people. But also the fact that these people came from various different industries. Some people came from different countries. They worked as a midwife in those countries. Some people came from they've been housewives their whole lives, but they also came with a wealth of experience, with a wealth of things that you don't learn in school. So I think I started doing my research, and I said, okay, because I was put in a position where I was leading these individuals to go into jobs because that was our primary focus. We want these individuals to stand by themselves, to be independent themselves. I did my little research and I checked, okay, what are the things that the companies are looking for these days? Yes, obviously you need education. You need a very basic level 2 English and maths functional skills. But then even more important that I found through my research was that these companies now are looking towards transferable skills. And when I say transferable skills, these include things like hands-on learning, communication, teamwork, people who are able to take these skills that they have not only learned in a classroom-based environment, but these skills that they have used in their own lives. So for example, even if you are as a housewife, you're taking care of kids, you are taking care of your whole family, you're managing things, you're almost a house manager, right? And you develop these skills which you can take them and put them in your job.
So transferable, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not something that you learn just in lessons. And you know, somebody in your lesson, you're sitting down, you're learning. Yes, you need the language. Yes, you need mathematical skills for a lot of jobs. But then management skills is something that you have yourself. And the only way you can get or you can hone this property is by doing it. And people coming from, I've had the privilege of working with so many people from so many several backgrounds that these skills have come to light. And I thought, okay, you know, when someone's preparing their CV, they don't need to just say, okay, I've sat in this classroom for 10 years or 15 years. But all these extra things that they have done in their lives can also come into it.
This is really fascinating stuff. So, there's a lot of studies in terms of, and it's been the discussion point from successive governments around the gap between the world of education and the world of work. So a lot of the traditional pathways, if you like, in terms of A-levels, college and universities, has been mostly theoretical. And there's, how do you kind of really bridge the experience part? And what you're saying is that a lot of people have already that experiential, experience already. And it's just kind of realizing that there's a transferable skills where they can actually earn, and that's really, really interesting. And I guess what would be the key, in terms of getting that skills to market? And I think one of the key focuses, and I think you touched on around digital skills, because obviously it's essential in today's learning market in terms of digital skills, but a lot of professions like in health and social care, where we found that supporting people into health and social care, there's a gap in digital skills, and therefore it becomes a bit of a barrier. So what would be the key things in the kind of learners that you're working with? What are the key skills that you've seen, apart from the digital skills, that could support that leap into the job market?
So digital skills has become increasingly important, especially since COVID. Since COVID happened, we drastically went from pure theory to suddenly, okay, everyone now go into digital skills and things like that. But I think there is also another thing that's important, right? Is I've been very involved in delivering Multiply for both Oxfordshire and Surrey Council. So when I first started delivering Multiply, I had this group of parents who worked as lunch ladies in schools, right? And if you go up to a lunch lady and say, do you use math in your real life? Your most prominent answer is going to be no. They're going to run away from maths. The first second they see maths, they're going to run away. But then I did this kind of workshop with them where they came with their kids, and they were little mimicked kitchens in the schools, and they were with their kids and they baked a cake as an activity. And they all knew exactly what they were doing. Some of them were even chefs, so they were much better than I was. I looked at the bag of flour and I said, I don't know how to do this. And they were like, the lady came up and said, take this. This is the whipping machine. This is this. This is that. So they were so good at it. And after we finished the session and I came outside and we sat the ladies down, we sat the kids down, and I said, do you understand how much maths you did in this session? And they looked at each other. They looked at me going, no. I said, did you weigh things? Yes, you did maths. I said, did you calculate? I gave you 100 grams of sugar for this cake. They turned around and they said, yes, I did. So they don't know that they're doing all of these different things in their lives already. And all of these skills, I think us Pravista as a company, we specialize in not just teaching them the skills, but telling them, you have these skills. You already have them. in them recognizing that you have these skills, you simply need to take them and apply it in your job.
So I want to open soon to Gurnam and Ori to get their perspective on things. So you're saying that the parents already have the skills, but
Absolutely.
they don't necessarily have the qualifications in functional skills.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of your, the kind of leap from the experience they have to what the employers are looking for, what's your kind of view around those, because you mentioned maths as a particular example. What is required here? I mean, do they really need a qualification? Do they need a certificate? Or is it, the training is a way of kind of, building confidence? I'm open to.
Of course, yeah. I think a bit of both, because the market that we are in right now, at the end of the day, they might go for a job and the employer might say, do you have a qualification? Do you have a certificate? Right? But I think this is what Provista is as a company, because we are part of Provista and we are the bridging gap. I think the tutor, because I started off my journey as a tutor, and even though you say, Pritha, you need to come out of the tutoring roles, I say, no, I cannot. I still go back to going teaching. I think we as a tutor are the bridging gap for these learners.
Sure.
And then as long as they understand that what they are doing, and at the same time, I think the market is going to evolve even more. I think slowly as we go, maybe in 10 years, 15 years, we'll have the same webinar, and I might tell you, maybe certificates are not needed. Maybe everything will be hands-on training. Apprenticeships will become the new certificates.
That is interesting and surprising, given that you're
surprising with my
so you're doing a PhD in.
I am doing a PhD.
What topic?
It is astrophysics or theoretical physics, but it's mainly mathematics. Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
No worries.
So I'm gonna open up to Ori. So I mean, what do you think about what you're hearing?
I was just about to almost intervene with. Because remember where I came to you for the multiply, for the construction. So if people they learn a trade or they learn a card so they can go on site, the feedback we're getting from a lot of sites, construction sites, from quantity surveyors and from project managers, if you ask somebody to mix paint or mix grout at a certain ratio, they can't do it. And the multiply is actually the idea to come to you guys for maths, for basic maths, percentages and ratios and simple stuff that they're asking him to do, epoxy grout, a ratio of 9:2. Most people look at the bucket and they have no idea how to do this. It's very strange because they know the other bits, but they don't know these bits, which is the feedback from why math is so important. So the multiply actually quite helped. The course in Surrey for Morgan Sindel, there's a lot. This is the same feedback from most of the quantity surveyors, that people at entering the industry don't know the things that I didn't think that mattered. But that actually is important. It's important. It's more important than the 3 weeks of health and safety sometimes, that they can do the functional bits on site. And they don't ask if they have qualifications. They ask if they can do certain things. Not to mention the huge demand for to be assessing them on the job as apprenticeships. They don't want them to go anywhere. Can we come to their site and and help them to progress on site? It's a huge thing.
So this is really interesting to me. So, from your experience working with businesses and employers, how do the businesses bridge that kind of gap? And how do they bridge the skills gap that they have in terms of candidates? Like you mentioned, the example around people coming in who do not have basic maths around percentages. So what's typically the strategy that businesses, based on kind of experience?
So apprenticeships has a mixed response over the last few years. Some of them were really, really poor, but for some topics, for some subjects, for some sectors, they actually work really well. Being assessed on site. The same with security, by the way. And I should just mention, very similarly to Pritha, my background is in university as well. 2 degrees I did, paid a fortune as an international student. I paid a fortune every year, and then end up realizing the degrees were good for nothing, almost, and spent 3 times more on professional courses on the cybersecurity and information security and cryptography. And the professional courses cost more because they actually enable you to do work, practice labs, and do things. The theory in a degree course, it has its own merits. But for the workplace, I think we moved on to some practical stuff. People are looking for practical stuff. We've added we've opened Crowdmaster a few years ago, and we provide hundreds of people for security for Wembley, for example, on the Taylor Swift concerts and England international matches and the boxing last week, and Arsenal and Chelsea football clubs and Hyde Park. We provide a lot of people, and we train them all with the help of Prevista. They've designed some programs for us because most of these event organizers have asked for things that are not on the courses. So terrorism and radicalization awareness, there's a lot of areas that they want people to be more clever at work, more practical skills. And Prevista were good enough to actually design some of these programs. Well-being, we've added, they wanted people to sort of practice a little bit about stress management and anxiety management, which helped a lot of people stay in work for longer. It's not just about a conveyor belt of shoving them into work. It was actually changing something about the way they do things and giving them skills, different skills, not even academic skills, actually. So yeah, there's some interesting programs, and we, as a result of these Prevista designing a few programs differently, we've actually been able to give people sustained employment. People are happier about what they do. They're better at what they do. And there's hardly any academic work involved in that sense. There's short courses, and then but other skills make them go to work. Completely different skills, completely different mindset.
It sounds like you're a bit of a fan around the vocational courses. It's big, I think it's based on the experiences that you've had with, in comparison to the thing. So I'm interested to open up to Gurnam, because Gurnam, you work with Brunel University, and and you work with graduates. So can you tell us a little bit from your perspective, and the spectrum of the type of learners and type of students, and what do you think about the conversation of what's been said here?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mohammed, and thank you everyone for bringing in their perspectives. And yes, I mean, look, I work with, as you said, at Brunel University a couple of days a week. So I see the whole end-to-end skills landscape, right? Working with Prevista from entry level, very vocational skills, to that very qualified at the sort of, I guess, degree program to PhDs. Now, I guess the other aspect which I'd like to bring into the conversation, which is quite insightful as well, is what then happens once someone gets a job. Because there's a skills journey once somebody starts work, right? And whether someone's entered in with vocational qualifications or with a degree program, there's still a requirement to upskill within the workplace. And coming back to some of what Pritha and Ori have said, it's a lot of it is around that whole practical application. Okay, so it is absolutely important that whoever you are, whatever route you take, it's got to be the right route for you, because it's about the career choices that you're making. And there are going to be, in some cases, where you are going to have to do a degree because it's a requirement, it's a prerequisite, but that's around your personal ambition. Okay, so it's not saying this is going down a degree route is the right way, or getting vocational qualifications are the right way. It's about where your aspirations are, and to get that career guidance at the very onset. And Prevista do that very, very well. We do information, advice, and guidance, and it's very, very bespoke, very specific to the individual needs, and it's about giving the right advice. And we've got those links in, as Ori was saying, with employers. We've got those practical knowledge and experience of working with people who may never have been in the workplace, as Pritha was saying, but understanding what those application and transferable skills are. And they go, in fact, I would go as far back as, I actually did a presentation at Chelsea Football Club with very early stage entrepreneurs. And everyone kind of, it's that you walk to the end of the plank and don't quite jump into the water because you're just touching, seeing whether I should start this business. And there's that nervousness around whether or not I can or can't do it. And one of the messages I gave to them is, you've got to recognize that you've already got the skills. And going even as far back as school, when you were asked to, let's say, do a project with a number of students to maybe produce a outcome, let's say in a lab where you did physics, let's say, for example, I'll give an example, and you were asked to produce a project with a product that actually could work. So not in theory, actually practically work. And let's say you had to produce let's say student A produced, went home to the parents and said, I've got to produce something that actually works. That's my homework. And they came up with an idea where it was a shoebox. And on one side of the shoebox is a light, right? On the other side of the shoebox is a glass. And they were able to use their iPhone or whatever phone they used to project out an image from the phone, okay? And that came through the glass. Now, it's a shoebox and a couple of things that you use every day. But the whole reason for this story is it's actually recognizing in school that you've worked in teams. You've had to think think about the application of some of those skills. And when you present yourself in front of employers, all too often we start to think about, well, I haven't done that. But actually you have, but it's working with organizations like Provista, where we help you to understand the practical skills that you have, where you can apply them into the workplace, okay? So I've jumped around a bit, and the reason for that is, going back to the employers, a lot of students, yes, I do work with university students and with academics, but I also work with businesses. I work on the sort of strategy, on the growth, the operations, and also recruitment. And the common theme across anything, whether you're at entry level or at senior level, is that application, okay? And coming back to what Ori was saying in terms of more professional qualifications, once people have started work, learning continues. It doesn't mean you've started a job and now you know everything. You do, if you're going down a specific route of a professional career which requires you to do like cybersecurity, you have to continuously learn, and that doesn't stop just because you've started a job. So hopefully I've given you an overview of that whole landscape in terms of education.
So Gurnam, so I'm very interested in your experience with the employer. So from what I've heard, on one side, degrees are important, like for specific professions. And I think the wider trend and how we started this conversation is, do we need degrees for everything? Or is it degrees for very specific things? Because there seems to be like, I remember like when I was, once upon a time when I was young, it was always that emphasis that, you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, and it was always degree. But as we mentioned some of the statistics, it seems like the employers are more leaning towards skills-based hiring, and there is a growing demand for degree apprenticeships. So you earn and you learn at the same time. As a view, and actually from a financial point of view, a lot of people going into a degree where they just, with the student loans, and then the job market doesn't reflect at the end of that, at the end of that rainbow is not typically, there's not typically a job that pays enough to cover the costs of living plus, the debt that you've accrued. So going back to the employers, from your, what's their focus? Is it more around skills? Is it more around their degrees? Is it competencies? What is it that you see, especially with startups, and especially with the type of businesses that you work with?
Sure, it's an interesting question, and hopefully my response will be quite insightful. I think, look, we're kind of seeing this from a job seeker's perspective. It's this whole alien world of what employers want. Actually, also equally, employers are quite alien to this new Gen Z type of recruitment methodology. The practices are very much, it's about changing that attitude and mindset from an employer perspective in terms of realistically what they need, what their criteria is. And some of the work that Provista are doing, we are changing that mindset to say, look, although degrees are important, and that's what you've traditionally used as a benchmark to employ people, There are individuals, and this new generation, and we're talking about young people who have got skills that are outside of the classroom, who are absolute bright sparks at technology because they're using technology every day. And employers are actually sometimes in many cases not recognizing that actually those transferable skills are more applicable because they can apply those skill sets in what is a very digitalized world, right? So I think going back to the whole question about whether degrees are important to employers, I think they're just following that traditional way of recruiting, but we're having to change their mindset because they're effectively missing out by actually putting that criteria ahead of everything else. Now, those that do have degrees, and one of the areas that I work in is innovation and applying those practical skills as part of a degree program. In fact, more and more students, and it's important to say here, no way is the right or the wrong way. You've got to make sure that you're doing what you want to, where your ambitions are, and what the educational and career path that you want to follow. So going back to the degree programs, many students are asking for that opportunity to do a degree program where they have that interaction with employers. So they'll carry out projects as part of their degree program or work placements. Maybe 2 weeks to 6 weeks, where they apply their theory into the practical environment. And in actual fact, it has been proven that those students who do both practical and theory actually are highly more employable, and the employment is more sustained as a result of that mixture of practice and theory. So hopefully, Mohammed, I've answered your question in terms of, I know it wasn't direct, but there's this perception that there's this, from a job seeker's perspective, that employers want all these skills that we don't have. And employers are saying, well, there's this whole new world of skills and this digital world, but we just don't know how to tap into it. And we're playing a very important role in educating both employers and of course, job seekers who are looking for these opportunities.
We've got a question. How would you effectively communicate to an old school employer looking for a degree that you have an ample set of transferable skills on the CV? Because often these candidates without degrees are overlooked and never get to the interview stage. So I'm going to give you that one. What do you think?
I think the CV structure from when I started off from high school and I was given a CV structure to use has changed a lot, because we started off with the educational skills first, and then we had a small section of transferable skills where you said that, I've done some sort of activity or hobby at some point. But I think from that, the way we structure CVs now have completely changed in the way you start off with you obviously define yourself and you say what kind of jobs roles you're interested for, but also alongside your educational qualification, you also have your work experience now, right? And instead of putting in work experience with just particular companies that you've worked with, it's very plausible that you put in your transferable skills coming from those companies. So for example, I started my job journey working in McDonald's. This was about when I was 16 years old. I wanted some pocket money for myself. So I said, I'm going to start working in McDonald's. And the thing is, I still to this day, I took so many skills from McDonald's because I had to work in a ridiculous amount of work pressure. And I'm saying this after almost being in the third year of my PhD, where I still compared the two pressures together. Because on a Thursday evening in McDonald's, it was in Moorgate, so it was central London, it was crazy. So managing, okay, you're taking orders from somewhere, and at the same time, you're also like talking to someone in the team, and at the same time, someone's messed up the order. So managing all of that together is a big transferable skill. And I still have it in my CV, where I put in McDonald's and all the skills, or pinpointed the skills that I took from them. So I think writing your CV in a way where you are really able to highlight the skills that normally people would overlook is a key way to get through from that. And I think employers are changing these days as well, because they're not always looking for really high list of qualifications, but also work experience at the same time.
So my first job was when I was 17. So from the colour of my hair, you can see that was a very long time ago. Not too dissimilar to you, Pritha, I actually wanted that job in the sports shop. And I went and knocked on the door. It was a proper high, sort of a high street store, well known at the time. And I knocked on the door, and the manager said, "Sorry, no jobs this week." So guess what I did? I went the next Saturday, knocked on the door. Employer said, "No, sorry, no jobs." But when they were looking, guess who they thought of? Me, because I was there every Saturday, knocking on the door with my CV. And that keenness, that transferable skills were showing already. I turned up every week. I knocked on the door. I asked. I was polite. All the skills that they need. And they find it really hard to find that person who's got that mixture of different skills, but also that attitude and that real desire and ambition to want to work for that employer. So I think the reason why I'm giving that example is, if you really do want to work for that employer, reach out to them. They're human beings. They are human beings. And I tell you what, they'll be pleasantly surprised. And if you need any coaching around this, if you need any hand-holding around this, that's what we're there for. So if there's a particular employer that you really have an ambition to work for, or a particular career that you really want to go into, then reach out to us. That's what we're there for. And we've got plenty of examples, and not only just examples, but practical personal experience of how we've done it as well. And we're there to really help you through that. So I just wanted to share that, because Pritha, you just took me back quite a few years when you gave your example.
Just to add to that, because I think that's very important, because when we started, when I was in my undergrad, the first thing that was told to me by my careers counsellor was, do not get disheartened if you don't get, you might make 100 applications and one person might respond to you, but then if you keep going, and that carried on throughout my life. When I went for PhDs, even now that I'm planning to apply for postdocs, you reach out to people and you say, listen, I'm interested to work with you. They might not get you straight away. Maybe 1 year, 2 years, 5 years later, you never know what window or door might open up for you.
I mean, as I'm listening to you both talk, I mean, we all have those stories, but it's really related to the attitudes and how people approach things. And I think you said something about Gen Z and like old school kind of job seekers v kind of modern times. So I'm interested, Ori, from your perspective. Do you see a kind of differences in attitudes and behavior from younger generation, the older generation? Is there anything that kind of comes out to you in how people apply for roles, how they present themselves?
I mean, it depends on who we're dealing with. If it's the security or the construction or the hospitality, the construction specifically, and we work with a lot of quantity surveyors, there's a couple of areas that you sort of need to be academic, which is the quantity surveyors and the engineers, because they sign off things and it's to do with liability and insurance and who's signing off a project. But all the other trades, people don't care what I mean, I tell you what, we don't even read CVs. When somebody asks for something, can you do it? And if you can show me a portfolio of work you've done, or if you can do it in front of me on site, you're in. And they still sort of want to show CVs and all the stuff that they've done. Can you do it or can you not do it? Forget what you've, and it doesn't matter what you did before, even if you're a ballet dancer. Can you do a job on site? If you can do it, it's yours. It's competency-based purely. There's hardly anything academic. The only academic stuff is, again, some of the jobs we've talked about, and it's to do mainly with insurance demand, that people are qualified to do something, which is signing off things in terms of being quantity surveyors and engineers. I think it's quite highly academic. The rest of the trades we get, I don't remember reading people's CV, and they submit a long list of things that they've done. And then I said, well, the fact that you have all these qualifications doesn't tell me that you can do this. Can you do it or not? And let's see you do it for a day. We'll be with you for the day. Let's see if you can do it. Forget all the stuff that you've learned. And it's we've learned this from quantity surveyors who like to see people do a job safely. In security, by the way, it's the same thing. Only when they get to safety officers of venues, they have to be a little bit more academic. They have to sign off for insurance and for the police. But the rest of them, we really want to know that they can do it. It's a really sort of purely competent-based approach. God knows I don't want to read thousands of CVs. Who has the time for it? So it's really, can you do it or not? And yeah, so definitely it's skill based, 100%.
Skill based. And in terms of attitudes as well, like in terms of how do you see any kind of differences in terms of generations or younger people v older people or?
The only thing, and it's slightly related, is because of COVID,
Yeah.
we have insisted that sort of we've had a few people that found it challenging to go back to managing their time in the morning and stuff like that. So this was the main challenge. It was the transferable skills, the time management and those bits. No, not the academic bit. No, that was the only challenge I can think of. It wasn't in a generation. It did affect the younger people more, I think, because I think slightly older people had the skill already, because they've been getting up for work. But people who started their working life around COVID time, it was a bit messy for a year or two.
Yeah,
that's the only thing. Yeah.
So in terms of from an employer's perspective, like how do you hire people? Like so obviously we've got some audience people have joined, and a lot of people come from a job seeker's point of view. So what do employers do in order to recruit? Will be interesting to job seekers in terms of how they leverage their kind of styles of applying. Like obviously you have people go to the job centers, people go online. Do we leverage platforms like LinkedIn to demonstrate their skills? What do employers do to find people?
So I can only say for the construction and for the security, we recruited the job centers as well. We've given about 500 people a job this last few months straight from the job center, and we do not advertise. We like to give people a chance, and people are some of them have anxieties and they're worried. That's why we've introduced other things into the program, just for them to manage their own stress levels and anxiety levels and stress. We do not advertise, actually. We like people who have a career change and people who like flexible work and people who like to be their own, to decide when they work, some of it, and people who would like to have a lot of freedom, and people would like to be treated well, I found. Mainly treated, we're a disability confident employer. So we found a lot of people who had learning difficulties and stuff. They can do the job. It's not difficult. Because it's going back to the same question. I don't want to see lots of stuff you've done in the past. The job that I need you for, can you do it? And I'll try you. I'll give you a chance. Everybody gets a chance.
So would it be fair to say that you work with partnership organizations like Job Centre, training providers, community organizations to find your candidates?
The work programs, the long-term unemployed, we've designed a couple of other things for them, which is a change of mindset. They've been told for a long time that they're not good for anything, and it's just another qualification in something won't change it. It's a change of mindset. So a couple of little workshops with CBT, they need to speak to themselves in a certain way. They need to change the way they talk to themselves. It's a change of mindset that will make them go to work, not another certificate. So every program has its own little, but it's definitely competency-based. Can you do it? Do you want to try and do it? I always tell people, I'll take you to work. If you hate it, don't do it. But trust me, you'll like it. We'll treat you well. So the idea is just to let people try.
Try different things and see what works.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good. So, I mean, Gurnam, in terms of emerging trends, should both employers and job seekers be aware of anything in particular, like that you see? Because you work with a spectrum of different businesses, like from startup innovators. What emerging trends are you kind of seeing? What skills are there in the future?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you won't be surprised to hear that digital is on the top of the skills, landscape, and that's digital skills because not because digital is all about AI in particular. Digital is everyone's building an app to actually make services more efficient, and that goes. I mean, if you think about a practical example that we all would have interacted with is going back to COVID is the app, right? And now since COVID and registering yourself to have a vaccine, to now booking your appointments, to now having virtual appointments with your GP, and the whole system it's digital skills across everything from financial services to health services to food services. I mean, you can order your food from your table, and you don't even need it, to a certain extent, in some cases, even a waiter. So I think that's definitely important. But also, what that means is, it doesn't mean that jobs are reducing. It just means you've got to skill yourself in where the jobs are going, right? Because then that creates a demand for skills in areas where the industry is going, and that is definitely digital. And I think the other area is sustainability. Employers are certainly more, and this is at a global level, not just here in the UK. Employers are more sustainably aware, and not just because they're looking to tick a box, but because they do want to take responsibility, and they look across their whole end-to-end delivery, supply chain externally, but also internally, around how they can implement good practices. And they need skilled people who can help them to not only deliver services or products and services from a sustainable perspective, but have ideas around that. And employers, actually, that's important. Be it startup world, where ideas are very, very important. How many times have you, and I'm speaking to the audience now, have you sat at home and thought, do you know what? If they did this, so you're buying a service or a product, and you think, if they did this differently, I think it would be so much better. Now, those are the thought processes. As Ori was saying, it's a mindset thing. Those are the thought processes. And if you can apply those really outside of the box thinking, and employers are more and more across the board, from startup to more established businesses, are looking for those ideas, people, right? You don't need a qualification or in that. It's more experience in how you can apply that. And if you don't know just on how to implement that idea, just coming up with the idea, because you're working with a team of people who've got different skills, who can work with you to actually make that idea a reality. And I think that's important. Businesses are certainly skills, sustainability. There'll be other areas as well, but those are the top. And I think amongst all of that is definitely those people who can think outside the box. And in fact, if I look at it from an employee perspective, more and more employees are looking for employers who give them the opportunity to think outside the box, because actually it's turned on its head. Before, employers were like, what can you do for me? Actually, employees are now saying, what can you do for me that's going to make me want to stay with this organization? So if you're not supporting people in the way that Ori just explained, if you're not thinking about their well-being, health and well-being, if you're not accommodating their real ambition and desire to make a difference, and trust me, more and more young people, I'm going to say young because that's where I'm seeing the trend, and that doesn't mean older people, but that sustainability and giving something back is very, very critical. And if employers aren't engaged in that, then they're going to lose a lot of talent. So it goes both ways. And I'm hoping that's sparking a lot of the audience's sort of energy in terms of thinking, well, you know what, that's important to me, and so is that, and so is that. Well, you know what, employers want to know, they want to hear from you then, because those are the areas where there's certainly a lot of gaps.
No, I'm really glad that you said this, Gurnam, is as a training provider. So one of the things, and I've been working in this industry for 25 years, is that it's around kind of realizing, and the best advice you give to people is work within the things that you're passionate about, things that really interest you. Because, if you do something that you have to struggle every morning to get up and to go to, it's not sustainable. It's not a thing. And it's like, really question your why. Why do you want to go to this particular career? Why do you want to do do those things? And really kind of have an internal dialogue. So, I mean, we started this conversation around the kind of pathways between kind of careers, through academic, go to college, university, and kind of vocational aspects. And a lot of the time it's driven from outside influences, right? Like from parents, from family members who have certain expectations. You should be a doctor, you should be an accountant. I don't know what what the time equivalent now is. Maybe like
it's still the same.
It's still the same. Okay, cool. So it's really kind of and also what I've noticed as well, there are different styles of training. There's different ways you can learn. So there isn't a semester go to classroom, go to college. There's online. There's gamification, which is brilliant. So I've seen part of games. You learn through playing games, and and you acquire and accelerate your kind of learning. There's training through VR headsets. There's many non-traditional learning ways of gaining skills, experiences, and knowledge. And there's a world of opportunities out there. Provista's kind of focus is around kind of working with employers in terms of making that happen. So I think this has been a really informative conversation. And it kind of recognizes the kind of shift towards skills-based hiring and emphasizing the growing need for adaptability and continuous improvement. And the invitation to people out there is to kind of encourage job seekers to focus more on acquiring in-demand skills. So Provista's strapline is prepare today for the opportunities of tomorrow. And there's a reason for that, because what we advise is not look at the jobs that are in demand today. What we say is let's forecast, look at what's going in terms of the sectors. So Gurnam, your work with innovators and startup businesses is very insightful. It kind of tells us a little bit about the growing market. And also we're kind of seeing more and more kind of in line with current demands, like yourself, Ori, in terms of the businesses that you're working for, and some of the changes you've seen. You mentioned around prevention of terrorism, safeguarding, and some of the different approaches. Even though it's in conjunction with security, is not you think how those things fit together, but it's basically reflective of what business challenges they're facing currently at this moment in time. Provista offers a lot of online courses. And these online courses are based on conversations with employers. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today on this webinar. As I mentioned to you, this is one of many series of Learn, Earn, and Thrive series that we're going to be running once every month. So be on the lookout for the next webinar towards the end of October. Thank you so much for joining today. And thank you, Gurnam, Ori, and Pritha for your contribution. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.